If you live in a place like New York City, like I do, you probably already know that when somebody is screaming NBC, they're not really talking about the television network. They're talking about nuclear, biological, and chemical attacks. But while those threats get most of the media attention and government funding, there's another threat that is brewing that is far more serious. And leave it to me to find it. The real story is cyber terrorism is real. It's here, and it's much more likely to affect you and your family than virtually any other major threat we face. A couple of weeks ago, I told you how a hacker was able to remotely take full control of a U.S. nuclear power plant. Do you remember? Just a couple of commands on the keyboard, he was able to shut off power to thousands of people. Fortunately for us, the hacker was hired by the power company to test their security, and hopefully they got an F, but, you know, because of today's PC world, they probably just got a try harder next time power company. Anyway, instead of just telling you what could happen if a hacker takes over a power plant today, I want to show it to you. What you're about to see is, what you're seeing here is an industrial turbine. It's just like one that our power plants use for electrical grids all across the country. It's been taken over by a computer hacker. There you see, the turbine spins out of control, starts to smoke, and then it shuts absolutely everything down, taking whatever electrical grid it was powering right along with it. Fortunately, once again, this was just a test, but it's another example of how ancient software being used by for our power and our utilities was never created with the internet in mind. It's, you know what, it's kind of like watching a high-definition football game on your 1962 television set. It really wasn't made to see each other and have each other work hand in hand. So how easy is it to hack into our critical infrastructure? Listen to this professional hacker.
I woke up tomorrow morning and decided I wanted to do that against a generator. I could, and it would not be that hard.
Okay. Fortunately, this guy works for us, the good guys, but for every one of him, there are teenagers in their parents' basement or in the Ukraine or in China that would love nothing more than to take out a major U.S. utility. Hackers call the next big attack the Cyber Pearl Harbor. Hopefully this time the sleeping giant's going to wake up, you know, in time to stop it, but somehow or another, I doubt it. Joe Weiss is a security expert who testified before Congress about cyber threats. Tell me about Pearl Harbor. What does this mean, a cyber Pearl Harbor? How many people are affected? How long does it take us to get our sea legs?
Well, let me first say thank you, Glenn, for having me on.
Sure.
And the next is, the cyber Pearl Harbor is ostensibly going to be the event where via cyber vulnerabilities you are able to essentially bring the entire infrastructure down.
Okay, for how long? I mean, is this a one of those things like we've had blackouts here in New York City, and it just goes down and then it comes back up. I talk to people who work on Wall Street, and they'll tell you all the time, oh, gee, we've got so many redundancies. So we're 4 times redundant. We're set, not a problem. How long is it down?
I've had this question asked to me many, many times. The real answer is we don't know, because it depends what somebody would want to do.
Well, okay, but we're talking here, I mean, I don't want to get into Y2K territory where you're all freaked out and then Y2K comes and you're like, oh, great. Give me some realistic idea of how many people would be affected and how long it would last.
Well, what you saw with the demonstration was the idea that you could actually damage real equipment. The problem is when you damage real equipment, this is something that was different than what occurred in the Northeast outage. The Northeast outage didn't damage any equipment. You were able to come back very, very quickly. So the Northeast outage, as big and as bad as that was 2 or 3 days.
Okay, so you're looking at knocking out everything from Boston to Washington, possibly?
It could be as wide as you want it to be.
Okay, and how long would it take you to, I mean, give me some idea. How long would it take you to replace the equipment if it was a bad hit?
Well, what you have to understand, most of this equipment takes months and months and months to manufacture. A lot of this equipment isn't even made in the United States anymore.
Perfect.
And not only that, this is very, very big, large equipment that may or may not be able to be transported over our existing roadways, under bridges, over bridges, etc.
Okay, so you're talking about possibility of months without power, without what?
Well, you're talking about, depending on what facility or facilities are hit, you're talking about an extremely long time to replace that equipment.
Okay. Joe, thank you very much, and I know you're going off back to Washington to testify some more on this very subject, and I appreciate it. Now, one of the most frustrating things for me is trying to explain how these issues that we talk about every night, how they are related. You hear about this one, and you're like, oh, well, and then you hear about that one. Almost every story and every incident is connected. Do you remember this comment that came from President Bush last year? It resonated with me, and I want to show it to you again.
See, maybe these are kind of isolated incidents. These aren't isolated incidents. They're tied together. There is a global war going on.
Okay. And this is where the media gets it wrong every time. They shine a spotlight, like I just did, on the cyber terrorism. Every issue we talk about, we need to stop doing this, the little flashlight over here and start shining a floodlight on all of these problems. The cyber terror story I just told you is not isolated from a story about, let's say, the price of oil. The price of oil is connected to the credit crisis and to the housing market and to the war in Iraq. It is all interdependent. All of it is directly connected to our own security. For quite some time, I've been asking, why is it we'll take credit for collapsing the economy of the Soviet Union with Ronald Reagan, yet we don't think it could possibly happen to any of us? The answer is arrogance. And we can't let that arrogance become our destiny. Let me remind you of what Osama bin Laden's words were. He said, quote, "We bled Russia for 10 years until it went bankrupt. So we are continuing this policy in bleeding America to the point of bankruptcy." I've told you this before, but the real story is that overspending, the price of oil, and war is what drove the Soviet Union into bankruptcy, and there's no reason to think that we are immune from that same fate. If you don't think our enemies understand that and have designed this, I want you to watch this clip. You're not going to see this anyplace else. This comes from Hezbollah TV in Lebanon. Just a few days ago, a researcher / convicted terrorist clearly spells out this strategy for taking us down. Watch.
نحن نقول بالفم الملآن الولايات المتحدة عدوة العرب والمسلمين والإنسانية في العالم. هذه الإمبراطورية يجب أن تموت. استراتيجية لمصلحتنا. أن تتورط الولايات المتحدة في حروب غير محدودة لا تنتصر فيها. هم مش كانت مصلحتهم أن يدخلوا الاتحاد السوفيتي في حرب لا ينتصر بها من أجل أن ينتهوا منه؟ كان لهم حق. كنا نقرأ عن ذلك ونقول ما شاء الله أذكياء يا أخي، أذكياء، لديهم مراكز دراسات، لديهم مخابرات، لديهم عقول. شو نحن حمير؟ مصلحتنا أن تدخل الولايات المتحدة في كل مأزق وكل ضروب وتفشل به.
I think the host said it all. Our enemies understand that if we are struggling at home, there's no way we can win abroad. But here's the good news. No one's hiding this plan from us. It's right there. It's in front of our eyes every single night if we would just stop refusing to open our eyes. That's the real story tonight.